Hey everyone, it's Drayton from ScaleTrains, and I'm excited to announce our first 4-axle locomotive in N-Scale. It's the all-new Rivet Counter EMD GP30, and in today's video, we're going to be going over all the railroads and paint schemes. So sit back, relax, and let's learn about the new announcement. Alright, so the road names and paint schemes in the first run of Rivet Counter N-Scale EMD GP30s are the exact same as the HO first run, except for Southern Railway. We swapped out N&W with Southern, but fear not, N&W will come at a later date. So let's talk about all the railroads and paint schemes in this run. And to begin, we're going to talk about Rio Grande. We're offering them in two paint scheme variations, the earlier flying lettering and then the later billboard style lettering, which I personally am a fan of. What's really cool about the Rio Grande, of course, you've got your operating headlights and of course your Gyra or Mars light depending on the road number. The flying version, which is the smaller lettering, is actually the as delivered appearance. It has footboards on the pilots, and it has an earlier style re-rail frog on the conductor side on the long hood, and then you have the later style version on the more contemporary version. That one does not have footboards, but it does have MU catch trays. So those are the key spotting features among the Rio Grande road numbers. Now, Southern Railway, my personal favorite road name in this run. Southern Railway actually had the most A units of any other railroad that had GP30s. They had 120. And Southern Railway needed these locomotives in the 60s. At the time, they were doing a lot of capital reinvesting programs. They were rebuilding a lot of their lesser used railroad lines like the Rat Hole between Chattanooga and Cincinnati, Ohio. They rebuilt lots of bridges and tunnels and things like that. But they also needed more motive power. The F units were getting older. The Alcos were getting older as well. And so EMD actually traded in actually more GP35s than they did GP30s, but they traded in a lot of Alcos in the 60s. And the GP30s were really a second generation locomotive in every sense. They replaced the first gen diesels that replaced the steam locomotives, and they had a lot of improvements. One of the things about the Southern GP30 is they continued the trend of using a high short hood, and on the GP30s, because of the tiny window on the conductor side on the long hood, the front is actually the short hood on the GP30s. A lot of folks are used to Southern Railway running long hood forward, and while they did that a good amount, they ran short hood forward just as much. So on the GP30s, the Southern Railway control stand is actually kind of at an angle, is actually kind of like this. So that way the engineer, actually it was almost like this, so that the engineer could operate this way and this way without having to hurt his neck. Now, on other railroads, the control stand was not at such an angle. I mean, you still had to kind of turn your neck. But the reason that Southern did that is because they wanted a bi-directional locomotive. Instead of going the N&W route with two control stands, they went with one, but at a almost angled with the part, shoulder with the part, to use a basketball term, so that the engineer had better visibility whether he was running long hood or short hood forward. We're offering the later Southern Railway Deluxe Gold paint scheme, which was a more vibrant yellow as opposed to gold. And the reason they went with that is because it was reflective. They used Scotch-Lite tape. Moving along to the Pennsylvania Railroad. So the Pennsy was pretty cool because they had train phone antennas running the top of the locomotive, and the GP30s did not keep the train phone antennas for very long. I believe it was the late 60s, actually during Penn Central, that they were removed, but train phone antenna was really Pennsylvania Railroad's attempt early on at having strong radio communications from the head end to the rear end of the train, and also being able to communicate with the dispatcher. And it worked okay, but then when they got on the Northeast Corridor, it didn't work so great because you had the overhead wire and all that electrical current interfering with the radio transmission. So it didn't really work out for Pennsylvania Railroad, but it's a really neat feature, especially to be able to see it in scale. The detail is absolutely incredible on these models, and I really mean it. It's like we took the HO scale model and just shrunk it. My thoughts when I first saw them was, honey, I shrunk the Jeeps. That's what I thought of. It's just amazing to see, even the traction motor cabling under the frame of the locomotive, under the sill. Absolutely incredible. So moving on to CSX. CSX inherited a ton of GP30s from Chessie System and Baltimore and Ohio and C&O, all of those railroads. And they were really getting old, middle of the 80s, late 80s, and CSX was looking to rebuild them. Well, they rebuilt a few of them. I believe they were called GP30Ms. But, if you ask anyone in the locomotive leasing business about GP30s, they will tell you that they are an electrical nightmare. Or just ask someone at a railroad museum. They will tell you they are absolutely terrible to deal with. And so instead of rebuilding them into, more modern GP30s like some railroads did, CSX elected to go with a Slug, a road Slug option. And they were designed this way to operate in coal country. They performed really well at low speeds. I don't remember the number for the cutoff. I want to say it was like 25 miles an hour. But they would cut out after they exceeded that speed because the maximum tractive effort of the mother unit had been reached. But at lower speed, you had a lot of tractive effort that was essentially wasted. So the Jeep30s were actually used quite a bit in coal country, and they performed exceptionally well at mine loadouts and those steep grades and tight curves in eastern Kentucky and West Virginia. And CSX had a lot of great success. They removed the fans, the radiator fans. They did keep the dynamic brakes. It's amazing to see this locomotive being offered. Many of us for years and years could have never imagined a GP30 Slug in HO scale, let alone in scale. And to see it here sitting on the table is pretty incredible. Of course, you got the air horn above the engineer, which at a later date it was moved down on the long hood for hearing protection and things like that. So, and it's kind of an interesting contrast to have CSX next to the Union Pacific, because Union Pacific actually was one of the early adopters of having the air horn further back to help with hearing protection. So on the UP GP30s, the air horn was located toward the end of the long hood, which was really great for train crews. Union Pacific had the most GP30s of any railroad. They had 112 A units and 40 B units. And one thing I just want to say about the A units really quick is that they had these unique sunshades. Union Pacific, I believe, was the only railroad that had these types of sunshades. And we'll show you a detail photo here so you can see what I'm talking about. But I just always have thought that was a neat feature that stands out among the other railroads. But the B units, they had some for passenger service and some for freight service. They were the only railroads that had the B units. First time in N scale, first time in HO scale, outside of a brass model. That's what our Rivet Counter line is all about, bringing that detail to you. Plus, you don't have to pay brass prices. Thank the Lord for that. The detail is absolutely incredible on these units. what really sets the B units apart from each other is you have all of this exhaust equipment up on the top on what would be the short hood. And that's for the steam generator. They had a steam generator located in the high hood, short hood end, and that way they could steam heat the passenger cars. And Union Pacific actually used these on, I believe, some military training trains where they were moving soldiers during Vietnam. There's some great information about the B units and the A units on utahrails.net. Amazing website, treasure trove of information. If you want to learn more about how to operate your railroad prototypically, you're going to want to look into the history of the B units. It's really cool. And then last but not least, we've got Chicago Northwestern in the original yellow scheme. We are offering, we don't have a sample here on the table, but we are offering a road number that has repainted battery box doors. That particular road number lasted, I want to say, into the early 90s, but the Chicago and Northwestern, they held on to their GP30s for the longest time. I mean, you know, every bit of 30 years they had these locomotives on their roster, and they used them on mainline trains right up until the very end when the Dash 9s and AC44s were coming onto the market. They were workhorses, and CN&W were very proud of their fleet of GP30s. Of course, you've got your air horn located on the right side by where the engineer is. One cool thing about the CN&W is that they were one of the only railroads that did not have dynamic brakes on their GP30. So where you'd normally have a fan, it's just not there. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Another thing I wanted to point out too is the GP30s, there are different types of fans on the GP30s. So for instance, the most obvious difference here would be like the Pennsylvania Railroad and the CSX. They have two different types of fans there where the dynamic brake hatch is. Same thing on the rear as well. That was an option from EMD. But that's what this Rivet Counter series is all about. Railroad, road number, and era specific detail, from the horns, bells, you know, the lighting packages. It's all about making sure that we replicate the prototypes as accurately as possible. And that's what you get as an N-scaler. And like I've said in previous videos, I've been so tempted to switch to N-scale just because of the detail in these models. I'm a lifelong HO scale modeler, but the detail and the sound is absolutely incredible. We just got these models from our factory, so we don't have a sound sample here in Tennessee, but we will be posting a video soon so that you can hear all the bells and whistles for yourself. So, but we're taking pre-orders now. Click the link in the video description. Make sure you put your pre-order in, because you know we're really kind of tightening up our pre-orders. You know, with the way that the economy's going and things like that, we're making sure that we're not ordering too many extras so we don't have overstock. So if you want one, I highly recommend pre-ordering now. You won't want to miss out on these amazing 4-axle locomotives. So with that, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe if you're not subscribed to the ScaleTrains YouTube channel. We'll see you next time.